Evil rests within us all. One's soul could be corrupted by the forces of darkness. But can those touched by the darkness truly escape its touch? Or are they perhaps doomed for eternity? Alan Wake, a video game about a writer named Alan Wake from a similarly named franchise Alan Wake, in production from 2005 till 2010, and getting an in-universe spin-off in 2012 recycled from the original sequel. The sales numbers failed Microsoft, but Alan Wake still got a reboot in 2021, which in my opinion looks a little bit worse than the original. But whatever. After years of being stuck in the darkness and standing in the shade of Red Dead Redemption, Alan Wake had his return to the light. This is why I present to you Alan Wake, a masterpiece that was stuck in the darkness. In this video I shall talk about the story, as well as the surrounding philosophies and theories. May I welcome you in the magnificently dark world of Alan Wake. The story begins 2 years ago, when the Wakes just moved into a new apartment in New York City. The key information here given to the audience is that Alice has a fear of the dark, a phobia she cannot control. Further within this flashback, Alan would tell Alice a story about a magic light switch called the Clicker, which when used would scare all the monsters that darkness brought away. Episode 1: Nightmare. The game begins in a nightmare where Alan hit a hitchhiker with his car. The hitchhiker becomes possessed by forces of darkness, and before Alan knows it, there is a terrible darkness looming over the dream. A darkness so great it could consume the entire world. Alan knows one thing for sure. The only place he is safe at is the lighthouse. We encounter one of the characters from Alan's novels, keeping Alan safe, even though they themselves get brutally murdered. Show Don't Tell is a very powerful tool. This dream also illuminates creation and creationists being torn apart from each other. Slowly making his way to the lighthouse, Alan also meets Thomas Zane. Illuminated like a light. Illuminated like a light of hope when Alan is in his most dire state. But it wasn't without a price. Before this, Thomas also used to be a very successful writer. However, that was before the same darkness which now popped up in Alan's world used Thomas' gifts and power and imagination to twist it to its very own dark ends. Thomas now was there in Alan's dream to warn him of the fate he was going to meet. 4 years before, the dark presence took his wife away from him, Barbara Jagger, and now wears her face as a mask to trick the new writer in order to set it free in a world and reality where it consumes everything and anything that it can get its grips on. The nightmare ends with the dark force infiltrating the lighthouse. As the darkness is desperate to get its hands on Alan, he finds himself waking up on a ferry, heading to Bright Falls on a vacation away from Alan's burnout.
Don't worry, it was just another nightmare,
Alice says to Alan as he wakes up in disbelief. And also that's one of the main subjects of the game, mental illness. And what does the darkness here represent? That absolutely casts an entirely different light upon the game. An artist deteriorating in his own mental health. The first 3 scenes of the game are primarily used to introduce the primary characters, the ones that play a role in the plot, or give depth to the world of Bright Falls, the location where the story finds place. On the ferry you will meet multiple important characters, like one, Mutt, who under control of a certain doctor, pretends like he kidnapped Alan's wife in order to get a manuscript. Next we have Pat Main, a local radio host. Radios are spread all throughout the game and really give it another layer of dimensions. Last but not least is my favorite character, Barry Wheeler, who only makes an appearance through the phone. Technically speaking, this is also the first time we see Alice, but I just kinda wanted to give a little backstory first. Next thing we know, they arrive at the diner to meet a guy named Carl Stuckey, a local landlord they hired a cabin from, and now we're there to claim the keys as well as the directions to the place. As Alan enters the diner, he immediately is overblown by the wholeheartedness of the waitress, who is a super fan of Alan Wake and even has a fan site dedicated to him. Alan asks Rose where Stuckey is. He's in the bathroom, she says, as she's hyping herself over Alan's presence. Alan's stubbornness shining through as he visits the restroom. This scene is also used to introduce very critical characters like Cynthia Weaver, the woman on the right, looking into the hallway. She used to be the muse of Thomas Zane before he went down with the island. An eerie looking old woman in a funeral dress greets Alan in the hallway as he was looking for Carl Stuckey. Carl Stuckey, who supposedly wasn't there and taken ill, without anyone looking twice. Was Rose mistaken about Stucky? As Ellen and Alice make their way to the cabin and try to settle in for the night, Alice shows that she brought a typewriter for Alan, which Alan feels less than comfortable with. Baba Yaga does a Tyler Durden. After Alice tells Alan about the local professional who works with burnt out artists and helps them set foot on their career path again, Alan storms off outside as the lights suddenly go off in the cabin. This would not have been Alice's doing. Alan panics as he's trying to make himself a way into the cabin again, in a rush. However, unfortunately he is too late. As Alistair screams mute, Alan sees his wife or body drift down into the darkness of the lake where the cabin is located on. He takes a leap of faith, then jumps down, and before he knows it, he wakes up 1 week later in front of the wheel of a crashed car. He didn't know it yet, but that night, Thomas Sane's light kept him safe. Waking up with a concussion and memory loss, his phone was dead, and he had to hitchhike his way to the gas station where he could maybe, perhaps, find help. But first he would have to make his way to the mountains, as well as the forests, in the dark depths of night. Making his way through the forest, Alan meets Thomas Sane. When Alan lost a week, he was held down in the darkness of the lake, where the dark presence forced him to write a story, a manuscript, which was about to come true, putting its claws in the writer's mind while it still could. But an old shoebox with books from Thomas Sane, the writer who used to inhabit the cabin before Alan was there, helped Alan spare a part of his awareness and gaining the ability to make Thomas work for him. To avoid the pages being in the grasp of the dark presence, Thomas took all of them and spread them around for Alan to find. This came at the cost for Thomas being sucked even further within the dark, endless lake. Going further within the forest, Alan finally finds Stucky, or at least what is left of him, his physical body still twitching from the darkness and letting out something the original Stucky would have said. Chasing Alan with an axe through the dark forest at night, Alan has to fight off the Taken as they almost overwhelm him. He never shot a gun before outside of a shooting range, but all of that changed tonight.
Vanishing into thin air, the Taken only left behind nightmare fuel for the rest of Alan in his lifetime. Arriving at the gas station, the head injury took its toll. Alan was touched by darkness. This is also where Alan realizes he was missing a week. Calling the police from the gas station seemed like a miracle.
Also, if you're going to try to go by foot through one of the tunnels, the roads are blocked. Which just begs the question if Alan is living forcefully within a story that's already written. The literal only option you have is call the police. This is where we get introduced to Sarah Breaker, the sheriff of Bright Falls. Alan desperately tries to convince her that he lost his wife at Cotton Lake, but when she brings him there is no cabin, and there was never a cabin, or at least not since the eruption in the early 70s.
Now this is pure emotion, people. This is absolutely brilliantly done.
Episode 2, Taken. Episode 2 introduces one of my favorite characters in the franchise. Alan's best friend and agent, Barry Wheeler, who we meet after we are introduced to Dr. Hartman, who gets his ass kicked by Alan. Hartman says he doesn't want to press charges and even offers Alan a stay in his lodge. His true intentions only becoming clear later on, as the truth is unraveled. Before we meet Barry and Dr. Hartman, Alan gets an anonymous call from a kidnapper, or a so-called kidnapper who claims to have his wife.
I need to take this. Hello?
Alan, please help me.
Alice?
Stop talking to the law. You'll do exactly what I say if you ever want to see your wife again.
Alice's driver's license had been placed in an old car rack behind the station. This intimidates Alan dearly. Little does he know this was all a scam.
Barry?
Ow! Ow! Thank God! Where the hell have you been? I've been trying to reach you for a week, you and Alice. I've been worried sick. I flew out yesterday. I'm here in Bright Falls.
Barry, listen to me. I'm at the sheriff's station. Come and get me. I can't talk now.
Also, I would like to point out some details of the world building and the details that went into the characters. This is where we get one of our first televisions which either illuminate a TV show or a certain part of Alan from when he was stuck in the darkness. This usually consists of him ranting and rambling.
A writer is a light that reveals the world of his story from darkness, shapes it from nothingness. The way a sculptor carves a statue from a block of granite. If I stop, the world I'm making dies. Darkness will reclaim it. It's a long, hard journey into the dark. Alice's life is at stake, but I can't think about that, or I'll lose it. The dread lingers at the edge of perception. I'll push on. Anything is possible here. I'll write the story. I'll save her.
You will either hear something very wise and philosophical, or something that is very relevant to the lore. Other televisions can be activated by the player themselves. They usually have either a TV show on them, which also consists of very philosophical subject matters, and sometimes they have in-universe commercials. What if this universe strayed off from another one where I passed away? Or what if we are just butterflies dreaming of being men? Are some of the very alluring subject matters of the TV show within the universe. I can absolutely go on for hours talking about philosophical matters like that.
Every year. I know it's exciting, the big day is almost here, but let's save it for the party and leave the gunplay for the shooting competition, huh?
Now, next step in world building we have are these little radios that are spread around the entire game. You'll often either hear a familiar character being interviewed, or Pat Main, the radio host. One, he is a very pleasant character, and second, he has a very nice voice to listen to. Next, our heroes go to Elderwood in order to get a new cabin so Alan can meet with the kidnapper, who called him and said he wanted to meet at Lover's Peak, which is not very far away from there. Rose was just visiting Rusty, who, as we can see in the manuscript pages, she has an affair with. Rose would have done anything to get closer to her idol, and she's extremely flirty with Barry, who thinks Alan is going crazy and hallucinated when seeing the dark creatures of the night. When finding themselves in the cabin together, Alan offers Barry one ultimatum. Either you work with me, or you go right back to New York. And as Alan is skirmishing the forest at night, searching and finding the kidnapper, the so-called kidnapper gives him an ultimatum. He wants the entire manuscript in 2 days, or Alan's wife is gonna suffer. In the meanwhile, when Alan left Barry alone, Barry changed his tone as possessed birds came down with thousands. The very next day, Barry goes into town to do research about the disappeared island where Alice was seen for the very last time, as he suddenly gets a call from Rose, who claims to have the entire manuscript. But something is off. That voice wasn't Rose, but the darkness using her likeness as a puppet. Episode 3, Ransom. When entering the trailer park, we get introduced to Randall, who is the park's owner and leads us to Rose. However, when reaching Rose's trailer, neither Barry, Alan or Randall realize that Rose is under the influence of something. The coffee was drugged, and the afternoon was taken from them.
It's coming for you, hiding in my barber's skin. I'm too weak to stop it. You must turn the lights on.
Alan is pondering in his mind as the deadline the kidnapper set for him is coming nigh, still under the influence that the kidnapper's real. Also, this episode is very progressive, for as Alan walks to the entrance of the park, Randall had called the police, which does illuminate a certain stereotype that certain men see women as victims.
I mean, just trust me when I say that it is never easy. I'm just talking with the other voice because that's like a little act, right? It really suits the narrative, and otherwise you might not take me serious, because when I think of
horror,
I hear a
deep voice accompanying the scare factor.
And there the game introduces Agent Nightingale. This could easily be a predecessor to police brutality, long before BLM did. This is where Alan has to make an escape from an angry Triggerfinger, and find his way to the woods as he is being chased by a full police force.
What are? I'm standing standing right here, you goddamn maniac!
As Alan is making his way through the forest, the Dark Presence hijacks the police force and Alan can only fend himself off with flashbangs. Trying to find his way to the coal mine. After a journey through the forest following the highest peak of the radio tower, Alan wishes to ask Batman where the coal mines could be. But before he can, after Alan enters the radio station, Nightingale arrives at the scene to shoot up the place. Alan has to find his way to the kidnapper all alone.
Calm down. Put the gun down. We're all friends here, right?
Cool your jets, Nightingale. We got him.
And when he is at the coal mine, the kidnapper never showed up.
Change of plan, Wake. You'll meet me at Cloton Lake. 2 hours.
I'm so angry.
When eventually meeting up at Cauldron Lake, which is where it all started, the so-called kidnapper admits he'd never had Alice. Even though through the game, Alan does get so-called phone calls from Alice.
And they were all a setup.
The Dark Presence is in the air, and it's out for Mutt, the so-called kidnapper. The Dark Presence turns itself into a powerful tornado and pulls Mutt in, snapping his neck in the process. The only difference between the Taken and Mutt was that the Taken were a more useful puppet. Then Alan gets sucked into the darkness as well, but Alan manages to grab a flare and protect himself against the darkness. Then a hand from the surface reaches down to grab him. Episode 4. When Alan comes to, he realizes he is in Dr. Hartman's lodge, drugged and almost deceived by Hartman's smooth talking. And though crazy people don't know that they're crazy, Hartman tells Wake his wife died in an accident, and that he is a delusional man who thinks he is the main character in some kind of story. Hartman tells Wake his reality was just one fantasy, a mirage. Alan's manuscript pages were gone, but when checking the manuscript in the game's menu, we find out how paranoid Hartman is about the darkness coming back for him, claiming its prize. A storm is coming. Against the forecast, Hartman dumps Alan temporarily at the two brothers, Thor and Odin, we met at the beginning of the story in the diner. The Andersons, as they are called, the old gods, who used to run a rock band in the early 70s, also have a real-life counterpart, Poets of the Fall. Thor and Odin, the old gods, tell Alan to visit their old farm. They say the moonshine would clear everything up. It would make you see the truth. Made with pure unfiltered water from the lake. Thor and Odin made a deal with the same dark forces and got their abilities taken from them as well. It's debatable if the old gods actually were the old gods, if you know what I'm saying. The storm has arrived, and the Anderson brothers knock out one of the staff members, as the other one is scared into locking himself up.
The markings on the tape said they were recordings Hartman had made at the sessions with his patients. I saw Alice's name on one of them. For a moment, I couldn't breathe right.
Now, Mrs. Wake, can you tell me about Alan's problems?
He's more and more out of control all the time. The parties, he's so angry all the time. He's getting violent.
Do you mean with you?
No, not with me. No, never.
Remember Alice's voice on the phone at the police station? Yeah, me neither. Alan makes his way into Hartman's office, where he finds a great collection of manuscript pages, as well as Barry, who got held captive there. The darkness arrived within the storm.
This is a mistake. Don't you see? Together we can create something absolutely wonderful, with your ability and mine.
It marks the end for Hartman's conscious mind. The dark presence consumes the entire lodge, and Wake and Wheeler make their way to the farm, where they are greeted by a stage fighting off the Taken. By the way, this is definitely a high point of the game. I love it. Then they get to the farm itself, where they find a record player playing, which literally gives them a clue on where to go next. The Lady of the Light, which we saw earlier. Cynthia Weaver, who was encountered earlier twice, once at the diner and once at the police station. Alan and Barry get drunk from the moonshine and pass out. Alan sees a lucid dream of a missing memory. It was from the night where Alice vanished. Using clues like a shoebox filled with books from a previous writer tricked by the darkness, Thomas Zane, Alan uses these clues to write the old writer into existence in order to set himself free, making a grand escape for himself, while Thomas pays the price. As he realizes he wrote the manuscript himself, which was coming true right now, before his very own eyes, he wakes up at the mercy of Agent Nightingale. Episode 5.
The Dark Presence was no longer trying to capture the writer so he could create the ending it wanted. The writer knew too much, he was too strong, and he carried a weapon left behind by Thomas Zane, something that could hurt it. Now, the darkness was doing everything in its power to simply stop the writer from ever reaching Cauldron Lake and the dark place it came from.
Barry and Alan wake up in jail. As the sheriff and Nightingale come over to the cell, Nightingale threatens to kill Wake, who is suffering from the darkness it's touch.
Lady, are you stupid? It's a trick. It's an obvious trick.
Okay, I've had enough of this crap. Wake, I'm gonna trust you with this.
You're joking.
But suddenly, Nightingale gets overwhelmed by a fear that he is just a character in the story. He grabs one of the pages he collected. During his deja vu, the darkness pulled him out of the picture. Barry stays at the station to make some emergency calls for the sheriff, while Ellen and Sheriff Breaker make their way to the helicopter's keys, which they will use to get to the dam where the power company is, as well as Cynthia Weaver. During the struggle to fight off the hordes, Barry is seen running away from the station. The darkness is after him too. After making it through the church, he'll be encountered again.
Guess that one saw the light, huh? You didn't like that one? A tough audience.
The four meet up at the dam as the Dark Presence isn't very amused. It uses its full force against Ellen. At the dam they visit the so-called well-lit room, where Ellen finds a manuscript page about the clicker, written by Thomas Zane.
The page was autobiographical, a memory from my childhood. But I didn't write this. It was a page written by Thomas Zane. None of them were supposed to exist anymore.
Alan, 7 years old, would fight sleep to the bitter end. When he did sleep, he soon woke up, screaming, the nightmares fresh in his mind. One evening, his mother, sitting by his bed, offered him an old light switch. She called it the clicker, and flicking the switch would turn on a magical light that would drive the beast away. To imbue the talisman with all possible power, she added that it had been given to her by Alan's father. Alan never knew him, and anything of his took on mythical proportions in his mind.
In the well-lit room, it seems very clear to Barry that he'll never see his best friend again. Alan was going to sacrifice himself for a woman.
I guess that's all my best friend felt when I did the same.
Episode 6. Alan was going back to where it all began, that cursed island, where a supernatural being took his wife from him, lingering her in front of him like a carrot on a stick to make Wake run like a horse.
Despite the willpower of Sheriff Breaker, she is stopped from joining in. She is not what the darkness is after all, and there shouldn't be any more casualties than already have been.
Poor Barry. God damn it. Stop crying. With the clicker in his hand, he takes a leap, for he remembered the story wasn't over. The typewriter he used to write the manuscript still had an unfinished page in it. He needed to finish what he started.
Alice has a fear of the darkness, a phobia of the dark.
Baby, you were having a bad dream. It was just another nightmare.
No,
Everything's fine. You're home.
it wasn't a dream.
Everything's
fine. Turn the lights on. Turn the lights on!
The powerful light of Thomas Zane shines through, as Alan sees a figment of imagination of his wife created by the lucid darkness. Thomas informs him that there will be someone to replace Alan while he is gone, a creature named Mr. Screch, who is left very open to who he actually is. That is, until the in-universe spin-off where we can clearly see what kind of a monster this creature actually is.
The hours passed, but soon are pulled back into the night. Alice vanished. This time, however, it's not Alice who goes missing, instead it being Alan who vanishes. People might have complained about Alan being an ass when the game released, but this only creates character development and enables growth. So basically, at the original plot synopsis of the game, Alan sacrifices himself for Alice, and it is rather unclear what happened to Alan in the darkness.
Or well, at least that was until they released 2 special features. However, it is made clear that from a cutscene after Alan sacrifices himself for Alice, that Rose might perhaps be the new Lady of the Light. I guess that's a torch to carry. Cynthia Weaver isn't shown, but Agent Nightingale seems to be unharmed.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Alan, wake up.
Special 1 and 2. The special episodes are an absolute philosophical masterpiece.
I had to accept it. If all of this was from my mind, then I was the one making all this happen. I was literally fighting myself. It was a moment of clarity.
Alan being stuck in the dark place, fighting his own fantasies, is also something fascinating to watch, as well as the conversations he has with Thomas Zane. I also love how Alan imagines Barry standing by his side every step of the way. As in episode 2, Barry says when Alan goes to meet up with the kidnapper, that Barry says he will be with Alan every step of the way in spirit. So with the help of Thomas Zane in the dark place, he gets himself together again, literally this time, as his conscience was separated, recontrolling the part which is of rational thought, and at the end we start at the same lighthouse as at the beginning in the dream Alan had, where he met Thomas Zane for the very first time. Very poetic.
Alan makes his way to the top of the lighthouse and ends up at Cloudon Lake again, where Alan finds the other part of himself which was missing, which he is able to access only after fighting his figment of Barry, who now turned against him, because that's just how Alan's mind works. It does really give a representation of the character, and how his own mental struggles affect his personality. So at the end of the game, Alan re-emerges with himself, and eventually finds himself at the end of the typewriter again, just so he can write the sequel which never came.
Theories. I guess Alan Wake will be lost in darkness just a little longer, but I am grateful for the re-release, even though I would have really preferred to see that canned sequel return. The darkness plays a game with Alan. So, if the Dark Presence has unlimited control of whatever it possesses, the Dark Presence might only be playing tricks on the artist it encounters, stealing their gifts and making it their own, until it is powerful and wise enough to consume everything. Thomas Zane is Alan's father. During Special 2, a conversation between Thomas Zane and Alan Wake can be heard about writing things into reality. In the episode The Clicker, Alan finds a page written by Zane about a magical device which would scare the creatures of the night away. Thomas wrote that Alan got it from his mother, who got it from his father, a man Alan never knew. Everything about his father took on mythical proportions in his mind.
Could it be Zane who wrote him into being?
Zane, are you playing some kind of game with me?
I am not the author of your story.
How can you say that when you wrote that page about me in the Clicker? It wasn't one of my pages. You directed me to it. You had Weaver guard it.
Yes, she was needed. And you needed the Clicker. But I'm not.
What? I don't understand.
Alan, you should keep going.
Zane? Zane, come on!
The darkness is a metaphor for mental illness. It is undoubtedly that some artists are extremely sensitive to their mental state. In Alan's dream we see creation, and creation is being torn apart, literally, as the sign of a billboard, as well as his creation, a character from a book, Clay Stewart getting the axe. Hartman's story could have made perfect sense. Even though the gameplay doesn't hold up in each and every standard, the game still carries a deeply profound story which is worth listening to, and which is worth remembering in the end. Just like the unanswered questions. Because remember,
This world is filled with mystery. Most of them we can never comprehend. It's not just a lake.
It's an ocean.